Breaking news. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the exiled mercenary chief for Vladimir Putin, has been missing for 8 days after a failed coup in Moscow. According to reports on RadarOnline.com, exiled mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has disappeared 8 days after attempting to overthrow the government of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Russian sources claim the 62-year-old warlord has not been seen since arriving in Belarus on June 26. This comes after Prigozhin suddenly ordered his Wagner private military company to march on Moscow on Saturday, June 24. However, over the weekend, several of Prigozhin's media outlets mysteriously went dark, suggesting that the exiled Wagner chief's business empire is under attack. "I am announcing our decision to close down and to leave the country's information space," said Yevgeny Zubarev, director of Prigozhin's Patriot Media, on Saturday. President of Belarus Alexander Lukashenko negotiated Prigozhin's amnesty in Minsk on Putin's behalf. It was reported that Prigozhin had arrived in Minsk on the 26th of June. Prigozhin's last known words before arriving in Belarus last week were that the Moscow uprising wasn't intended to overthrow Russia's leadership, but rather to avoid destruction of Wagner. Ahead of their arrival in Minsk, the Wagner leader emphasized that their march was not intended to topple Russia's government. The protest was organized to prevent the destruction of Wagner and to punish those responsible for the numerous mistakes made by government officials acting in an unprofessional manner. Despite Prigozhin's amnesty in Belarus, according to multiple sources familiar with Putin's attitude toward traitors, he still may not be in the clear. Get the daily scoop by subscribing to the RadarOnline.com newsletter and never missing a story. Daily. Breaking. Latest gossip about famous people. Nothing is charged for. Last week, British MP Tobias Ellwood warned, "If I were him, I would be very careful what I ate and where I went. If there are any dissident opinions, Putin silences them himself." Prigozhin kept his life, but lost his Wagner group, said former CIA Director David Petraeus. And he should exercise extreme caution around any open windows in his new home. As a dedicated educator working to improve secondary school opportunities in rural Bangladesh, I have long tracked budget allocations for the sector. One of our greatest educationalists, Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, expressed alarm at the proposed budget for the 2023-24 fiscal year, and I found his words illuminating. He stated, "The record-high national budget of 761,785 crore takas has in it the record-low allocation of 88,000 crore takas for education, which amounts to 11.57% of the total budget and 1.76% of GDP. This was published in the Daily Star on June 2, 2023. What is produced within the borders of a country in a given year is known as its gross domestic product, GDP. To put it another way, 1.76% of Bangladesh's GDP will go toward funding educational opportunities in the country. This is a negligible sum to spend on something so fundamental to human existence." Numerous studies, including one by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in Tanzania and Zambia, have shown that increased government spending on education can contribute to economic growth and the reduction of poverty. Bangladeshi government spending on schools raises questions. The country ranks a dismal 184th in the world in terms of education spending, as of 2021. This is due to the fact that only 1.76% of GDP is allocated to this area. There may be a variety of causes, so this is not a question that can be answered with a single factor. The fact that Bangladesh as a whole does not appreciate the monetary worth of education is a major factor. We don't seem to understand that investing more in education leads to economic growth and reduced levels of poverty. The startling dearth of economic studies estimating the value of education in Bangladesh provides support for this theory. One could make the case that Bangladesh's high GDP growth rate is attainable despite the country's relatively meager investment in its youth. Given the multiplicity of causes for high growth rates, it begs the question of why we fail to appreciate that greater investments in education would have resulted in even higher growth rates for our country. This widespread ignorance about the monetary value of education has cost Bangladesh in other ways as well. the country has wasted half of its demographic dividend period without successfully turning its young population into useful labor. Taking advantage of the dividend will have a more positive effect on the lower-income population segment, as the population is expected to grow in this sector. As a result, we're also passing up a chance to narrow the income gap. Promoting and prioritizing an economic approach to education is necessary to reverse the backsliding and diminishing importance of learning in our society. In particular, Bangladesh needs to investigate how investing, say, 100 crore takas in the education sector would affect the country's growth rate, equity, productivity, and the availability of skilled labor. There is no need for flashy econometric studies. A cost-benefit analysis, that is straightforward and easy to grasp, would serve the purpose. There also needs to be more support for a fiscally responsible approach to education expenditures. In a prior piece for the Daily Star, for instance, we discussed the need for an English medium education system to run alongside the existing Bangla medium one. Allocations within the education sector were discussed, including those made for mother tongue Bangla and for STEM subjects in comparison to English. The economic viewpoint offers solutions to all of these problems. Decisions must be made on broader issues, such as how much emphasis should be placed on general versus vocational education. Real-world examples include the government's plans to create a new school of engineering, medicine, etc. From the macro level down to the micro level. It is fascinating to see how families make decisions about their children's education based on an implicit economic analysis. A rural father, for instance, might weigh the costs and benefits of selling farmland in order to send his son to college. My opinion is that these methods of decision-making at the individual level, which are backed by implicit economic analyses, can be formalized to analyze the bigger picture. For instance, a daughter's higher education should have the same strict economic cost-benefit analysis as a son's. There is no difference in tuition between a male and female medical student. On the flip side, a female physician ought to make the same as her male counterpart. As a result, sending either a son or a daughter to medical school would be the outcome of a purely economic formal analysis of higher education. The benefit of economic analysis is that it eliminates the need to consider extra economic elements. Disparities in treatment based on demographic characteristics outside of economics include stereotypes about men and women, cities and the countryside, religion and community, the wealthy and the poor, and so on. Results that are not skewed by factors outside of the market tend to be more valuable overall. Particularly in developing and emerging economies, the field of education is fraught with extra economic factors like socioeconomic fads, vapid prestige issues, the perception of social class climbing, English medium versus Bangla medium instruction, domestic versus foreign degrees, etc. Individually and collectively, the education system in Bangladesh is crucial. However, Bangladesh badly needs a more analytical and rational approach. Every level of education decision-making, from national spending to a rural poor family's choice of school for their children, is infested with perceived, often irrational factors. Both the country as a whole and its individual citizens suffer as a result of this loss of potential revenue and development. It has yet to be determined what role Putin's Russia played in bringing an end to the Wagner mutiny on June 24 of this year. Wagner mercenaries under Yevgeny Prigozhin's command fought bravely in Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast for months, ultimately capturing Bakhmut and providing Putin with his only major war victory of 2023. Then, under the banner of the March for Justice, they hastily crossed into Russian territory to confront the Russian military. It was a shocking turn of events that was monitored for some time by U.S. intelligence agents. It looks like a lot of planning and preparation went into the march of these heavily armed mercenaries. Without firing a shot, they overran the Rostov-on-Don headquarters of the Russian Southern Command. Reuters obtained footage of Prigozhin, who was armed at the time, chatting on benches with Russian Deputy Defense Minister Yunus Bek Yevkarov and Army Lieutenant General Vladimir Alekseyev, both of whom were unarmed.